Unfortunately, yeah, pretty close. Looks like time. Are we hot this morning? Oh, there we go. Yeah. Well, good morning. We're about to get started this morning. I want to welcome everybody, whether you're physically here or digitally here. We want to welcome you. This is our Bible class, Sunday morning auditorium Bible class. And we are journeying through the Gospel of Matthew. I guess plotting is probably a better term. We're not in a real big hurry, so we're just kind of taking it as it comes. And so we've, I don't know how many months we've been doing this now, but we're all the way up to chapter 9. We are just moving at breakneck speed. And that's okay. That's they made the mistake of telling me I could take my time, and so we're going to take our time. I'm in no hurry. Matthew chapter 9 is where we are, and if you remember, last week, if you were here last week, we were finishing up the, hang on, I'm pulling it up on my handy dandy digital Bible here. It would help if I could speak. We were in the section that begins in verse 9, the calling of Matthew. And we covered all that. We got to the part where he's having dinner at Matthew's house, and the Pharisees, they're not brave enough to go to Jesus. They pull his disciples aside and say, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But Jesus hears it or overhears it. Somebody tells him. I don't know the logistics of it, but when he heard it, verse 12 of chapter 9, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician. Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I came not to call the righteous, but sinners." And we talked about last time that is a direct quote of Hosea 6:6. And the phrase, "I desire mercy and not sacrifice." In the Hebrew, it is the word hesed. We've talked about that a good bit, which is translated mercy, kindness, loving kindness, steadfast love. It's basically the Hebrew word for the essence of who God is. It means the never-ending love of God, the unfailing love of God. That's the Hebrew. Now, when he quotes it, it's written here in the Greek. In the Greek, he's using a word that means covenant love. It's very similar to a marital love, not in the intimacy aspect of it, but in the covenant aspect of it. It is a love that is based on a covenant or that kind of thing. So when Jesus says this to them, he says, go figure out what this means. Go understand Hesed. Go understand this, and then you'll understand me. So what's he telling them? Go learn what this means. Go understand Hesed. Go understand mercy, and then you'll understand me. If you figure out what this means, you will understand that I didn't come here for the righteous. I came here for sinners. Now that's a very provocative statement. A lot of stuff loaded into that. What's he telling them? Oh, amen. Don said, "Thank God for that." Those of you at home, I know you didn't hear that. Jerry. Very good. Absolutely. He came to forgive and not to condemn those who were doing wrong. Okay. See, absolutely. And for the rest of you, it's not about you. And I think that's important because the Pharisees were much more about sacrifice. The word that's used here is not the actual word that's used for a lamb being placed on an altar. It is a word that generally means worship. It was the way they would, like when we say, I'm going to go to church, we're not really talking about a place. We're not really talking about a building. We're not even really talking about when we'll say, oh, well, the church is the people. We're really saying, I'm going to worship. But we use that word as different because of cultural connotations with it. Same thing with this. I desire sacrifice. The word he's using is not the word that literally means the actual sacrifice. It's a word that they would use to say worship. And so he's saying, I desire mercy more than I desire church. So the Pharisees, though, are the opposite of that. They're very much, there's not a whole lot of mercy. There's a lot of ritual. There's a lot of regulations. There's a lot of law. There's a lot of, and so the dichotomy, if you will, is that Jesus says, I'm much more worried about God's unfailing love than I am about whether you're getting the ritual right. I'm much more worried about mercy than I am about religion. So I think if that's the message that he's giving the religious people of his day, what's the message for the church today? It's not about checking the boxes. It's about checking your heart and reaching out. Absolutely. Anybody else? Y'all got to wake up now. We should have brought coffee for everybody. Come on. It's not the ritual. It's not the ritual. It is the relationship. Jason? Ooh, okay. It's about spreading the gospel. Unpack that just a little bit more for me. Yeah. Okay. Showing people, those who would be considered sinners, how Jesus loves them. I like that. Anybody else? I don't want to step on anybody. Yes, ma'am. Going out of your comfort zone. Absolutely. Because these guys were absolutely saying, that's just not something we do. You're not supposed to do that. You're doing something you're not supposed to do. And Jesus says, y'all need to worry less about what you're supposed to do and more about the people, more about the relationship. When Jesus calls Matthew, Matthew stands up and walks away. We glaze over this. We've heard it so many times. But as you're looking at that, Jesus says, come follow me. And he does. I read that, and as I'm thinking through this, I'm like, would we respond the same way? If Jesus asked me to leave my livelihood, to give up my career, to follow him, would I? Because that's what happens. I mean, this is not just a little thing for him to follow Jesus. I mean, that's a big deal. And we don't know. Maybe he went back and was an honest tax collector. I don't know. I would judge that if you believe that this is the same Matthew that wrote Matthew, and there's debate about that because there's debate about everything, but that's not the point. If you believe this is the same Matthew that wrote Matthew, then obviously he is becoming a disciple, becoming one of those who's following Jesus. He's not going back to work. He didn't just follow Jesus on Sunday and then go back to work on Monday. So, would we do the same thing? I'm not asking you to comment on that because we can say all day, oh yeah, but we don't know. But it is something worth thinking about. Would I be as committed as some of these things? Jesus acted in a way that caused scandal. When he went to Matthew's house, he knew that was going to cause a scandal, right? I don't think this was an accident. He didn't just go, oh, really? I'm sorry. I didn't realize y'all would be upset about it. No, he knew. He knew what was happening. But he was more worried about the outsiders, about those who were outside of the religion of Judaism at that time. He was more worried about them than he was about the rules and regulations. So Jesus was not afraid to cause a scandal. So he wasn't worried about his reputation. Now, so here's my question. Why is his church so afraid of scandal? Well, that's true. It does depend on which kind of scandal. But I think it's a safe assumption to say that 21st century churches, and I'm not talking about anyone in particular, are very reluctant to be scandalous. Maybe I'm wrong. If I am, tell me. But why is the churches today so afraid of being scandalous in the same way Jesus would have been? Okay. Okay, that's a better question. Miss Pat's rephrasing me that because scandal has a different connotation, and I agree with that. So why are churches today so afraid to get out of our little box? Doug, your hand was up, and then Cecil. Okay, it's basic violation of tradition. Expand on that just a little bit for me. Uh-huh. Right. Yeah. Tradition. Yes. He's violating tradition. Stepping outside of the normal. Cecil, did you have your hand up? Ooh. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. So that it could fit. Absolutely. Cody, you had your hand up. Oh, okay. Churches like that are full of followers instead of leaders. And that's not just that's every church. I'm going to tell you, I probably shouldn't do this, but these are the thoughts that go through my head. You know, there's a voice in there that's got reasons saying you probably shouldn't do that, but it hasn't stopped me yet. Tony Campolo is a speaker, teacher, Baptist preacher guy, and he was famously speaking the last time he was ever asked at the Southern Baptist Convention, which is a big, big deal. And he stood up in front of all these people, and he said, there are millions of people outside these walls going to hell, and we don't give a damn. And he let that sit there for a minute, and then he said, and more of you are upset that I said damn from the pulpit than you are upset that I said there are millions of people going to hell. It's very provocative, and it's a way to stir things up, but it doesn't make it any less true. We're so worried about scandal. We're worried about, I don't want to say that word in the holy confines, but we're not worried about getting out of the holy confines and getting into contact with those people we need to be in contact with. Ann? Ooh. Absolutely. Absolutely. I have a friend, and he's going to a different church now, and he's really happy, and he was saying, oh, this church is just so much, and it's just and I'm like, well, that's because you don't know all the stuff. Because I guarantee you there's stuff. He went from preaching to just being a member, and now he's not in on all the drama and all the stuff, and he's a lot happier. Well, that's because you don't know all the stuff. But I guarantee you there's stuff, because there's people. If there's people, there's stuff. It's just, it's the way we are, Don. Ooh, yeah. If the folks you're around every day don't know you're a Christian, you probably not being a. Jesus responds to the Pharisees' question, and y'all know I think Jesus is the coolest ever. He responds to them with three things: a medical analogy, a verse from Hosea, and a statement of intent. Right? Notice the medical analogy and the statement of intent kind of sandwich the scripture here. Both set up a contrast: the healthy righteous on the one hand and the sick sinner on the other. And so they're drawing a relationship, right, between sin and sickness. They are sin and uncleanness. That Jesus is making this contrast, which is really cool, because in our culture we miss a lot of the cool stuff, because Jesus is not merely using Scripture against them. He's also using their own rules and regulations against them. Remember, I told you last week there were a lot of professions that the Pharisees considered unclean, right? That camel driver and donkey driver and tax collector, and there was a whole bunch. Remember, I gave you a whole list. The Mishnah that we read last week was giving. Well, there's another line in that same Mishnah that I saved for this part, because that same Mishnah, that rabbinical literature that delineated all these trades and jobs that were unclean, says, the best of doctors is to Gehenna, and the fittest of butchers is a partner of Amalek. Gehenna was another name for hell. So the doctors were included in that list of unclean jobs. Now that blows our mind, because we have doctors, doctors and lawyers and all that's up here, and they're the top of the, maybe the I don't know. But anyway, you get my picture. In our society, it's much different. In their society, a doctor, a bloodletter, he comes into contact with blood, he comes into contact with death, he can't be clean. It's just the necessity of his job. He is going to be unclean. So Jesus now, when he says it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick, is making this vague illusion that they're going to catch, because the doctor is necessary, but the doctor has to get unclean to do his job. Now, do you see how that makes this statement even bigger? Because Jesus is comparing himself here. I'm coming down here and getting unclean. Because, when Paul says he was in very nature God, it doesn't get much cleaner than that, much more pure, right? And so any step away from that is going to be impurity. So I'm coming down here like a doctor has to get unclean to bring healing. I'm coming down here to bring righteousness to the sinners in the same way. Do you see how that magnifies that whole? Maybe I'm a Bible nerd and a geek, and that's true. But I got fascinated by it. I've heard this story all my life, and that part never dawned on me, the magnitude of what Jesus is saying. The heart of their critique is the question, what does God prize more? Religiousness, religion, religiosity, whatever words you want to use there, or being merciful? I think the same thing is true for us. Does God prize more being religious, going to church regularly, or being merciful? Miss Pat? Yes, ma'am. An acknowledgement of God. And they would have known that, because that's a common, it's not something that's obscure to them. He's hitting them with something they would have known and been familiar with. And so he's not just coming out of left field. So God is not just the God of the faithful. That was a big deal to them. That was a mind-blowing concept. That God, remember, in their theology, the Jews were the chosen people, and everybody else was a Gentile. Everybody else was outside of the Hesed of God. And so when Jesus is including those unclean people in that's a big deal. That's a mind-blowing thing. Now, but then we move on. Verse 14. Then John's disciples came and asked him, "How is it that we and the Pharisees fast often, and your disciples do not fast?" Jesus answered, "How can the guests of the bridegroom mourn while he's with them? The time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, then they will fast. No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch will pull away from the garment, making the tear worse. Neither do people pour new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the skins will burst, and the wine will run out, and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and both are preserved." Now let's look at these individually. First, the disciples of John. Now the disciples of John at this point are just kind of running around. Why didn't they go ask John? This is an easy one. This is a softball. He's not dead yet. He's in jail. Yeah, but he's going to be soon. He's in jail. He's in prison. They can't go ask him. It's not like that. And so they're kind of running around like sheep without a shepherd. But they're still doing what they're supposed to do, because they were called to repentance. And so they come in there. I don't think this is a trap question. I think the Pharisees were trying to mess with him, but I think this one is not. I think this is a genuine information-seeking question. Now, I could be wrong, so that's just my opinion. Take that for what it's worth. But I think they're coming saying, why do we fast and they don't? How come we have to do? How come we're doing this and your guys over here are not? Because John pointed at you and said he wasn't worthy to unhook your sandals. So we're kind of following along with you here, but we're not jiving with this, because your people don't do what we do. And what does Jesus say? When the bridegroom's here, there's no reason for them to mourn. Now, that's another one of those cultural idiom things that we're not going to get. Jesus is making himself the bridegroom, and he is comparing the disciples to the guests. What is he saying? Well, the phrase literally is the children of the bride chamber. When he says the guests of the bridegroom, that's how it's translated in ours. Literally, it's the children of the bride chamber. These are the attendants of the groom. Now, you'll hear sermons where these are the attendants of the groom that go and get the bride and bring her back. That's not what this is, because that tradition hadn't happened yet. That was something that came a little bit later, and those are called by a different name. The children of the bride chamber, this is an allusion to the bride and the bridegroom are both going to have their attendants, okay? It's kind of the same for us, but not really. I mean, the groomsmen don't really do anything. I mean, I'm being honest, right? You've been in a wedding, you've been a groomsman. We don't really do anything. But the children of the bride chamber, the bride and the maidens waiting on her, the groom and his friends, there are a lot of references to this. I'm not going to read them all because you don't care, but there are a lot of references through a lot of Jewish literature to the children of the bride chamber. The idea that that these are, but the idea is that now a Jewish wedding is going to last 7 days, okay? And during the 7 days, the children of the bride chamber, both the bride's attendants and the groom's attendants, are absolved from any of the ritual things that they would have to do. So, any of their ritual fasts or prayers or feasts or whatever, okay? Because there were certain things at certain times that had to be done in certain ways. But when they were children of the bride chamber, they were absolved from that because the wedding took precedence over the religious ritual. Are you with me so far? So when he's using that term on purpose, because he is the bridegroom, he is here among them, and as long as he is here among them, they don't have to worry about the rituals. Now, after he's gone, they will be worried about the rituals. So what does that mean? What is he trying to get the disciples of John to see here? Anybody? Nobody. There's a new way of doing things. New sheriff in town. But seriously, yeah. Because that metaphor of the wedding and referring to the bridegroom, Jesus uses that a lot. You notice that? I mean, we'll see that over and over and over, especially through Matthew. He's going to tell parables about the weddings, and he's going to reference the weddings. And why? Why is he doing that? Evan? Yeah. Very good, very good. I want to try to restate this for the folks at home. That when you're fasting, when you're praying, when you're doing those rituals, whatever they are, you're doing those things to try to connect with God, to try to talk to God, to try to interact with God. But if God's standing right there in front of you, then worrying so much about the ritual is sacrificing the relationship with the God you're trying to connect with. I buy that. I think that makes sense. I think that's why it ties directly into what's happening before. I desire relationship and not ritual. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. The children of the bridegroom are not going to fast when the bridegroom is with them, but after he's gone, they will fast. So what about the next part? No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch will pull away from the garment, making the tear worse. All right, now I know we have real seamstresses in this room. I can't speak from that experience, so I need some of you who can. What happens when you sew a patch of new material onto an old garment? How does that work? Jerry, you don't sew anything. I know you know, but I want somebody that actually sews. Jerry sews as much as I do. Okay. Yep. There. Because they had shrunk. Right. Okay. But if you then sew a new garment, a new patch onto an old garment. Come on, seamstresses. You ain't a seamstress either, Jason. Come on, seamstresses. I'm looking for my seamstresses that know what they're doing to speak up here. Y'all are all looking at each other. Don't go there. Don't go there. Bernita? There you go. And that's what Jesus is saying. I mean, like Jerry said, when you buy a new pair of jeans and then you wash them and they shrink. Well, now they're all broke in. They're all comfortable. You like them. You got your favorite pair of jeans. You get a hole in them. Well, nowadays you'd be fashionable. But isn't that funny how that circled back around? I'm buying jeans for my kids, and I'm like, y'all, it's like 1985. This is what I wore in junior high. Well, I don't know what, we get you a members-only jacket and a parachute pants. Yeah, oh, yeah. We did too. Anyway, sorry, that's I'm rabbit trailing. But so you sew that patch on there, right? And then you wash that garment again, and what happens? Well, that patch then shrinks. The other part doesn't shrink because it's already shrunk, and it tears apart. So Jesus says, nobody sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch will pull away, making the tear worse. So then he says, we don't know as much about wineskins, so that's why we know about cloth and fabric and stuff. So what is he saying? I mean, I know what he's saying about the fabrics and stuff, but that's not the point. What is the point? What is he trying to say? He's incorporating this in with the bridegroom thing, and just the same way nobody sews a new patch on an old garment. What is he saying? You're missing the big picture, and you're going to make it worse, because that's what happens. When he says it's going to make the tear worse. They're not going to be compatible. The old rituals and the newness of Jesus is not going to be compatible. If you put new, still fermenting wine into old, dried wineskins, and yes, he is talking about fermenting wine, not grape juice. You'll get this argument all the time. Grape juice wasn't a thing until Mr. Welch invented a process to keep it from fermenting. Wine was wine because it was wine. And so we're not going to quibble over that, because that's a ridiculous argument. But the fermenting wine was either stored in jugs that could hold like 10 gallons or whatever, or it was stored in these leather skins. But if new wine was placed into an old skin, the old skin had already shrunk and dried and been done what it was going to do. When the new wine started to ferment, it would then bust or tear up the wineskin. There's no room for it to expand. So what's the old and the new in these analogies? We've already touched on it. What's the old and what's the new? Jesus is the new. What's the old? The law, the ritual, the tradition. So the old thing, he doesn't say he's replacing it. You notice that? He could have used a different analogy if he was going to come in and totally replace it. He's not totally replacing it. Go back to the Sermon on the Mount. I did not come to abolish the law and the prophets. I came to fulfill the law and the prophets. I'm coming to make them what they were intended to be in the first place. So he doesn't say that I'm coming to replace this. I'm coming to be the new thing, but the new thing and the old thing are not necessarily going to be compatible. In both metaphors, the thing is ruined, right? The garment the tear is worse. The wineskin is unusable. In both settings, the old thing is made worse by its connection with the new thing. So there's two things happening here. The kingdom of the bridegroom is a feast. It's a party. It's a joyous occasion. And he's directly connecting this to the meal that he just shared with the unclean, with the sinners, right? And so the kingdom of the bridegroom is a time of joy. Now, I've heard this passage preached when I was younger as this is Jesus, this is Christianity versus Judaism. And this is how Jesus is saying, you know, the old is going to be done away with. That's not what he's saying. He doesn't say he's coming to replace things. He says he's coming to fulfill things. This is not Christianity versus Judaism. This is Jesus versus legalism. This is Jesus and the bridegroom and the joy and the feast versus the letter of the law, the exact thing that we're supposed to do. And so the kingdom is about proclaiming freedom and liberty and not about a new set of laws and regulations that I'm supposed to follow. Miss Pat. He talks about new wineskins. There is going to be something new. The new patch, the new wineskins, there is something new coming. But is it a replacement or is it a continuance? The old wineskin is not being used. Okay, I'll buy that. Yeah, it's a fulfillment. But because we are pulling this forward. How do we? I want to leave with this question. This is we're running out of time. How do we attempt to do the same thing today? How do we sew new patches on old garments? How do we put new wine in old wineskins? How do we do the same things today? Jerry? Say it one more time. We've always done it that way. Why should we change? Okay. See? Absolutely. There are some who want something new so badly that they're willing to destroy whatever they're a part of in order to get that new. I see that. Evan? It causes rifts. It causes tears. I agree. Doing whatever we have to reach those who need reaching. And, I mean, you'll notice we try real hard to, like with worship, what Cecil's talking about. We try real hard to include everybody. And so we try to sing songs that we may not know, newer songs. We try to sing the older songs as well because we don't want anybody to feel alienated or left behind. Now, that may mean we don't always do exactly what you want done. But that's the old. There's a story about a guy. Francis Chan was a famous preacher, and somebody comes up to him after worship and goes, I just didn't really get anything out of the worship service today. And he says, well, good, because we weren't worshiping you. He says, good, because we weren't worshiping you. But the point is, and sometimes. I'll be honest with y'all, and we probably should cut the video, but I'll be honest with y'all, I'm not a big fan of the Jesus is my boyfriend songs. And you know what I'm talking about. But here's what I do when that happens. I look at my kids or I look at these college students up here, and that is connecting with them in a way that I don't understand. But hey, if that kid's up there worshiping God, I'm all for it. Now, I know little old ladies that I don't necessarily connect with the 17 verses of the same song over and over. But you'll look at them and that song means something to them because it captures something in their life. And you'll see that older saint worshiping. And again, that's what it's about. It's not about me. It's not about whether I like it or not. It doesn't matter. I'm not here because of what I like. That's not the purpose. I'm here because, why are we singing? To speak to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, and to God. Okay. So, I'm going to participate. I'm going to be a part of it. And sometimes the new and the old has got to learn to work together. Now, we also still sometimes try to shove the new into things that it doesn't fit in. And so sometimes we got to get rid of the old wineskin and get a new wineskin. Yeah. Absolutely. The new covenant and the old covenant are two different things, and I agree with that. But we've made it where we throw the baby out with the bathwater. And what I mean by that is the old Mosaic covenant was different than the new covenant in Christ. However, we couldn't have got to one without the other. And so the new covenant is the fulfillment of all this. It's where we've been going, really, if you want to go all the way back since Genesis 3. He's been trying to get to Jesus, and that's been the point. And so I think there is a fulfillment aspect of it. But you're right. It is new. We're not up here this morning, sacrificing a cow. And pouring the blood into stuff. We're not doing that because that's different. I'm gonna go Miss Pat and then Kara. Go. No, and that's not just our movement. There's a lot of that going. Andy Stanley, who's a famous community church preacher now, famously not long ago, a couple of years ago, said we need to unhitch Christianity from the Old Testament. I know what he was trying to say, but you can't do that. You can't understand grace unless you get the concept of Hesed, because that's why it doesn't make sense to us. But when you figure out that that's been God's nature since the beginning, then it's not this new thing that Jesus thrown in that doesn't make sense at all. Kara? Nice. Whole new meaning. You get me? And all the married people say, amen. Okay, we're about out of time. Hey, good job this morning. I know this place is not conducive to conversation. I appreciate you guys participating and trying to move this thing along. Again, we'll be back in Matthew next week. I hope you're here. In the meantime, I'm gonna let you out early a little bit, so you're gonna have a little extra time. Fellowship, talk to one another, take care of your business. Be back in here at 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock. We're gonna worship. Sorry. Thanks, Jason.